Hey everyone. So today I have this Map of Vienna for you that's been specifically designed for anyone walking through the city instead of taking a car or a bike or public transport. And you can see that there are a number of different lines in different colors. Here we have some yellow, some light pink. Always some information for people who might decide to walk through here. So let's have a look at what they mean. These blue dots that lead here around the ring street, around the inner district, as well as up here along Kärntnerstraße, Graben, Freyung, Schottengasse. They mean that this is one of the main connections, so often quite busy. Then the yellow parts indicate that it's either a pedestrian zone or, like here in Rotenturmstraße, so-called Begegnungszone. So it's mixed. You can use it by car, but you can also walk in the middle of the street. So this is a new concept that we have. Then we have some light pink, like here, Kärntnerstraße, Operngasse. Then down here, Maria-Hilfer-Straße, Gumpendorfer Straße, Margaretenstraße. These are all labeled as shopping streets. I had a little look around. I don't know if I agree with all of these. For example, up here, this is La Salstraße, and it's a really, really busy street that goes from Praterstern across over the Danube. And there are a lot of cars there. And of course you have some shops here in the street, but I don't know if that's what I think of when I hear shopping street. So then we also have some green dots. They're in the middle of the park, so I think it's pretty clear that they are some streets that are calmer. There's a lot of green there, so they're probably more pleasant to walk. The orange dots, however, this one here also leading through a park, mean that they are not fully accessible. So they might be difficult to use, for example, with a wheelchair, because of the ground that they're on, or there might be stairs. So I do tend to walk a lot in Vienna. I do really enjoy it. And I often, for example, walk through here, which is the MuseumsQuartier. You can see here, it has the blue dots that say it's one of the main routes to walk through. But this is also an area that's really inviting, especially now when it gets warmer, to just sit outside and enjoy the sun. And this area is sometimes known as something like a public living room. It has its own kind of furniture that I can show you. It's featured here in this little Vienna design guide. And they're quite famous. They're called Enzis, or that's how they're still known. For a while they were called Enzos. Then I thought today there's actually again a bit of a different version, which is just called Vienna. And it says here, the MuseumsQuartier, Austria's most beloved cultural area, used to be a boring concrete slab until the Enzis came. Commissioned in 2002 by the MQ procurator back then, Daniele Enzi, and designed by the Innovative Architecture Office PPAG. The Enzis are public pieces of furniture made of hard foam that allow an extremely flexible usage and have filled the art mile with vitality. They've since been exchanged for the Enzos, which are more robust. The demand for the most successful domestic outdoor furniture has led to the recent production of a smaller version for private use, along with a soft and fabric version. And since 2008, the Viennese can vote which color the Enzis or Enzos, or today the Viennas, should have in the upcoming season. Even the urban living room requires a regular change of scenery. So as far as I know, by now, the color only changes every other year. And it should change this year, but I haven't seen the poll yet. So maybe it's not up yet, or maybe I simply couldn't find it. And interestingly, you might also find these abroad nowadays. I saw in 2010 they were in Madrid and in Barcelona, and in 2013 they were in Moscow, all as part of an advertising campaign by Vienna Tourism. So these are quite famous, and like it says here, you can buy them, but they cost something from 1,400 euros upwards, and they're 100 kilos, so might need a lot of space for it, and I don't know if they're worth it, but I think that's quite interesting. So you would find these here in this area. And if you're walking around, then this area here right behind the MuseumsQuartier is also really inviting. It's called Spittelberg, and I don't know if there's a definite border to it, but I would say it goes something like this. Breite Gasse, Siebensterngasse, Kirchengasse, then across Burggasse, and along Neustiftgasse, back towards Volkstheater and Breite Gasse. And you can see that for one little block, there's actually quite a lot of small streets in there. There is Kirchberggasse, Spittelberggasse, Schrankgasse, Sigmundsgasse. Here you would have Gardegasse and Fastziergasse, and of course the St. Ulrichsplatz. Now if you compare this little block here with its 1, 2, 3 streets leading through it with, for example, this block here, or even this one, you can tell there is something a little different about this space here. And one of the reasons is that the buildings in here are a little older than the ones that you would find here in the rest of Vienna, in this area. They're often Biedermeier houses, meaning they date from the early 19th century, whereas most of what you'd call Altbauten, so the typical old buildings in Vienna, date from the late 19th century. And funnily, today this area is really, really popular, especially in winter when there's a Christmas market. But also in summer, you can sit outside here in one of the many Schanigarten, so outside a restaurant or a cafe. But back in the day, this area was known to be a little unhygienic, partly because these streets were so narrow and it was so densely built. And apparently there was a lot of prostitution, so this was not the best area in Vienna. But today it's one of the most gentrified areas, I think, in the inner city or the inner districts. And it's just really inviting for a little stroll through here. Really, really nice. Then, of course, generally here you see that there are quite a lot of shopping streets, more or less. You can definitely find a lot of smaller shops too. A lot of local designers. You might be able to find some jewelry or some fashion statement pieces here. And then if you cross Marie-Hilfer-Straße, which is one of the busiest streets here in this area, and this time it really is a shopping street, and you go through the 6, you get to this large purple area, and that is a market space. You can see here there's a little apple. This is the Naschmarkt, which is quite famous. It's the biggest market in Vienna. It goes all the way here from U4 Kettenbrückengasse, and it's between the rechte Wienzeile, so straight on the right hand side of the Wien River, and the linke Wienzeile, so the street on the other side of the Wien River. The Wien here is underground in this area, and it goes all the way up to the Karlsplatz station. Here you would have an entrance next to the Sezession, which is a museum. Now, the Naschmarkt, I think, is also the oldest market we still have here. It's from the 18th century and initially was located a little more in the north. Back, of course, when this ring street didn't exist yet. There was a city wall, the so-called glacis, so some free area, and then the Vorstädte, the suburbs, would start here. It extended towards the south over time, and eventually, when this whole area was reconstructed, it was placed here in this area. The little stalls that you have were built in the early 20th century, in 1915. So it really is quite old. And it's also quite famous. If you're looking at some tourist information for Vienna, you'll probably find some info on the Naschmarkt. Personally, I don't particularly like going there. I do like sort of the side on the linke Wienzeile. You have a lot of restaurants and cafes, so I do like these. But the market itself is not my favorite. It's very small, often very, very busy. And I have to say, personally, I prefer some markets a little more open, like here, next to Rochusmarkt. here, this is one I only discovered recently, near Vorgartenstraße. This is a really, really lovely one. Then of course here you have the Karmelitermarkt. This area here also being really nice to go for a walk. In the north, in the 20th, you have Hannovermarkt, which is also a very busy area. Here the market at Uppenplatz. And occasionally you also have smaller ones, like I know here in the 5th. At Margaretenplatz here you occasionally have a small market, I think once a week. So there's no sign here, but there are a couple more small markets throughout the city. But the most famous one's definitely Naschmarkt. And there are some changes coming here to this area. Not so much the market itself, but here in the south, this part here is currently up for debate. It is a parking space that gets used for flea market every Saturday, but I think the flea market's mostly here on the right hand side. On weekdays this really is just a huge parking space, and of course in summer this is a typical urban heat island. It's just this huge concrete square without any shadow, without any green, so it really heats up quite badly. And there are some talks about maybe turning it into a park. From what I understand, the current government favors a market hall. Personally, I'm not quite sure whether that makes sense since you already have the market here. But I'm guessing they've thought about it. Personally, though, I think park here would be really good, because while Vienna is known for being quite a green city, if you look at this area here, the inner districts, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, 7th and 8th, there's hardly any green at all. We have a small park here, Esterhazy Park. We have some very small ones here that don't even have a name on this map because they're so tiny. If you go over here, of course, you might find the Theresianum, but this one is part of a school and a diplomatic academy, so it's not accessible to the public. Neither is Schwarzenberggarten, as far as I know. You can enter the Belvedere Garden, the Botanical Garden, and the Alpengarten is accessible too, though you have to pay a small fee. Down here would be a Schweizer Garten and Arsenal, so that's quite green. Of course, also across the Donaukanal here, there's the Prater, which is quite nice, but from this side of the inner district all the way across there is a fairway. In the north we have the Augarten in the 2nd district, Liechtenstein Park here in the 9th. This here is labeled as Le Lycée Français. I'm not sure the French Institute's still in there. It's a beautiful park, but either way, again, it's not accessible to the public. You have some green spaces here in the 9th. This is a former hospital, very, very old. Today it's part of the University of Vienna. And then in the inner district, in the first one, you have some parks: Motivpark, Siebenfreudpark, Rathauspark, Volksgarten, Burggarten, and of course, Stadtpark. But this part here really does lack some open green spaces. And I think this would be a really, really good opportunity to add some of that. But we'll see. Now, over here, because we've just talked about this park here, and we've mentioned it, Esterhazy Park, there's an interesting building here, this grey blob, Haus des Meeres. It's an aquatic zoo and it's located in one of the Flak Towers of Vienna. There are 6 altogether. Let's see if we can find them. So, number 1's here. Number 2 would be here, inside the Stiftskaserne. So funnily, that's one that you can't actually see from outside. If you're here just doing some shopping, you would have no idea there's a Flak Tower in there. Then we have one here in Arendt Park. And there should be a second one somewhere in the area. Let's see if we can find it. Might just be this one here. Right, I can't quite see it now, but it's here, somewhere in this park. Harenberg Park. So here's 3 and 4. And then 5 and 6 would be here in Augarten. 1 would be here. And the second one, I think, is this one here. Now, the interesting thing about the Flak Towers is that all 6 of them are protected, so they can't be removed. But only one of them really has any usage, and that is this one here with the zoo. With the other ones, there have been talks about turning them into maybe data centers, or maybe some contemporary artworks, maybe turning them into archives. I think one of these 2 has been used for contemporary art, and it was called CAT, Contemporary Art Tower. But it's been closed in the meantime and it can't be accessed anymore. I know in one of these there have also been some issues with an explosion that happened quite a long time ago, but it's impacted one of the walls, so you can't get too close either. It's a little dangerous. So I think they're just standing there watching over you if you walk around here in Augarten. Just as a reminder. But I don't think there are any specific plans on what to do with them. And especially here in Augarten, they really look quite displaced too. You have a porcelain museum here. You have some urban and gardening spaces, I think in this area, or somewhere along here. This is a really, really peaceful place, very quiet, with these 2 gigantic towers. And the reason they were placed here, so 1 2 and 3 is because they form sort of a triangle around the inner city that was meant to protect it. And the other reason was that they were close to one of the train stations, like the Nordwestbahnhof here. But luckily, they weren't ever really used. So if you come to Vienna and you want to see one, maybe go inside, you can go to this one, Haus des Meeres. It's recently been changed a little. It now has a glass facade, so it looks a little different. But here in this corner, on the left hand side, you also have the option to climb it. So there's a wall to climb all the way to the top. Alright. So let's close this up and see if there's any more information. Here we have some info on the Viennese market. I think this is quite an old picture. This year you have to wear a mask there, and this one is a little oddity. That's one of the tote bags. They were given out by the Greens in Vienna, and since last year they're not actually in government anymore. There's a different coalition now, so I think this photo might be from before. Then here we have some contact information, what you can do if you notice any issues, any problems. If you have questions in winter, you can also download an app for pedestrians, which we also have up here. This is their little logo, person on foot, and it counts your daily steps, and I think you can participate in little competitions in your district and maybe win some vouchers for a free cup of coffee, things like that. Then down here it also tells you about another app. It's called Cool Vienna, and it shows you where you can find some cool spaces, especially during summer. It's really been quite hot the last couple of years. Here's a Kritzel rally for children, so they can explore their district. And you can download some quizzes. Here's the Mobilitätsstadträtin, so the part of the government that would be responsible for our walkways would be the Mobilitätsstadträtin. Alright. And then here on the other side, you can see where all the green is located. namely right here on the western outskirts. It's the Leinzer Tiergarten with the Scharlatzerwald, Königsklosterwald, Laurenzerwald, Jakoberwald, Johannserwald. So all kinds of woods and forests. There's die Hohenauer Wiese, Renzinger Wiese, Hörndelwald. And you can also see that there are, I would say these are almost more like hiking routes, because that's quite a distance that they're covering. Here you can walk along the Liesingbach. That's also one of the very, very small rivers in the south of Vienna. Past the Wienerbergteich. Here you can stop by a U1 station. So if you get tired, just hop on the public transport. Let it take you back home. Or you can continue here towards the Zentralfriedhof. Now, this doesn't look very green, but the Zentralfriedhof definitely is quite a green area too. And if you walk through Kaiser Ebersdorf, you finally arrive at the Danube Island. Of course, you can cross into the 22nd district or just continue all the way up here without any cars or buses. You can just walk between the trees. And then here in the northern part of the Donauinsel, you might find a lot of bunnies, and I think up here there's also some sheep. However, you might have to return here to the Nordbrücke to get off the island. And then of course here in the north, both on this side and on the other side of the Danube, you have these beautiful ways through the Vienna mountains. Well, let's say Vienna hills. Here the Höhenstraße, of course, is also accessible by car. And if you find the right spot, you can look down across all of Vienna. Or maybe here in Krapfenwaldbach you can even go for a swim. And here on Koblenz, I think they're currently building a new cafe. There's also a little zoo where you can see some animals. So it's a nice place to go if you have children. And of course, you might be able to stop quite about anywhere here for a glass of local wine. You probably don't want to walk too far after that. Alright. So let's fold this back up. There we go. think that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.